The Grand Canyon is one of the most breathtaking landscapes in the United States. Stretching for miles, with towering cliffs and a silence that feels almost eternal, it's a place where thousands come every year seeking beauty, solitude, and adventure. But behind the postcard views lies something far darker. The canyon has swallowed hikers, campers, and explorers, people who walked in and never walked back out. In the summer of 2011, a married couple set out for what should have been a peaceful camping trip inside the canyon. They had packed their gear, told their families about the adventure, and promised to return in just a few days. But when the sun set over those vast red cliffs, they seemed to vanish into thin air. Their tent was never found. Their car remained parked at the trailhead. Search teams scoured miles of rugged terrain, but there was no sign of them. No footprints leading deeper into the desert. No equipment. No clue at all. For 8 long years, their disappearance remained one of the canyon's strangest unsolved mysteries. Friends and relatives could only wonder, had they fallen into one of the endless ravines? Had they been caught in a flash flood? Or was something far more sinister lurking in the shadows of the desert? Then, in 2019, a lone hiker stumbled across something unexpected, half buried in sand at the base of a narrow wash. At first, it looked like nothing more than a weathered piece of fabric. But when he brushed the sand away, he uncovered an object that would reopen the case and raise more questions than it answered. Because what he found should never have been there. They were not thrill seekers, nor were they strangers to the outdoors. Michael and Sarah Thompson were an ordinary couple from Flagstaff, Arizona. Michael, 42, worked as a high school history teacher. He loved nothing more than sharing stories of ancient civilizations with his students, often drawing connections to the landscapes around them. Sarah, 39, worked part-time as a nurse and was known by her friends for her calm demeanor and quiet strength. They had been married for nearly 15 years. And though their lives were simple, they shared a bond built on routine, laughter, and a mutual love for nature. Camping was something they had done together since the early years of their marriage. For them, setting up a tent under the stars was not about escape, but about connection with each other and with the wild open spaces that surrounded their home state. The Grand Canyon, with its endless cliffs and hidden trails, had always been their favorite place. They had visited the rim several times before, but this trip was meant to be different. They planned to venture deeper, to spend several days camping in one of the canyon's lesser-known areas where tourists rarely went. It was early June of 2011 when they set off. The weather was hot but bearable, the skies a piercing blue, the kind of day that makes the canyon seem endless and alive. They packed carefully a small 2-person tent, sleeping bags, food supplies, a portable stove, and Sarah's worn leather journal, where she often scribbled notes about their trips. Michael brought along his old Nikon camera, a gift from his father, determined to capture the rugged beauty of the red rock walls. Friends later recalled how excited they were in the days before leaving. Sarah had told a neighbor they wanted just a few days away from everything, and Michael had mentioned to a colleague at school that this trip felt like a much-needed reset before the busy year ahead. They parked their car at a designated trailhead, locked it, and hiked down into the canyon with their gear strapped tightly to their backs. From that moment on, no one would ever see them again. The first day inside the canyon was everything they had hoped for. As the sun lowered in the sky, the walls around them glowed deep red and orange, shadows stretching like long fingers across the sand. Michael paused often to take photographs, framing Sarah against the massive cliffs, her smile small against the immensity of the desert stone. She wrote a few lines in her journal that evening as they set up their tent. Quiet everywhere, only the wind. It feels like we're alone in a world that belongs to no one. The couple cooked a simple dinner over their small stove, canned beans, bread, and instant coffee while the air cooled rapidly after sunset. Above them, the night sky revealed its full brilliance. Stars scattered so thick it looked as though someone had spilled salt across black velvet. They spoke softly, their voices carrying into the silence, about how lucky they felt to share this moment together. On the second day, they explored deeper. They followed a dry wash that wound between towering cliffs, stopping often to rest in the shade. Michael photographed strange patterns in the rock walls, while Sarah pointed out desert plants clinging stubbornly to the cracks. A few hikers passed them early in the day. One later recalled waving to the couple as they rested on a boulder, but after that, the canyon swallowed them in solitude. By the evening, they reached a narrow clearing where they decided to camp again. Sarah's journal, recovered years later, held one final entry from that night. The writing was brief, almost hurried. Beautiful, but too quiet. Something feels different tonight. Can't explain it. No one would ever know what she meant. When the sun rose the next morning, the Grand Canyon was as silent as always. The cliffs stood unchanged, the river far below continued its endless flow, and the desert winds carried nothing but heat and dust. Yet from that point onward, Michael and Sarah were never seen alive again. When Michael and Sarah failed to return on the day they had promised, their absence was first met with patience. Friends assumed they had chosen to stay longer, that perhaps they wanted one more night under the stars before returning to the routine of work and responsibilities. But by the second evening, unease began to spread. Sarah's sister, who was expecting a call, received only silence. Michael's school colleagues noticed he didn't appear for a staff meeting. By the third day, their families contacted the park authorities. The search began quickly. Rangers located their car, still locked, sitting quietly at the trailhead where they had left it. Inside were a few spare supplies, neatly packed, untouched. That was the first sign that something was wrong. They had not planned to leave the canyon by any other route. Teams moved into the canyon with dogs, helicopters circled above, and volunteers combed the trails. The Grand Canyon is not forgiving terrain. Its endless ravines, dry washes, and sudden cliffs can hide nearly anything. The tent was never found. There were no cooking supplies, no clothing, no discarded wrappers. It was as though the couple had carried everything with them, and then simply ceased to exist. What the searchers did find was unsettling. A faint set of footprints, believed to match Michael's hiking boots, led deeper into a narrow gorge. But the trail ended abruptly in an open patch of rock, where no prints continued. Sarah's tracks, lighter and less distinct, were lost even sooner. The dogs picked up a scent but quickly lost it near the same area, as if the desert air had swallowed all traces. Investigators considered a number of possibilities. They might have been caught in a flash flood, which can sweep through the canyon with little warning. But no recent storms had been reported. They might have fallen from a hidden ledge, their bodies unreachable in some remote crevice. Yet no signs of a fall were found. More chilling theories began to emerge. Could they have crossed paths with someone dangerous in the vast emptiness of the canyon? Despite weeks of searching, nothing more surfaced. Not a camera, not a piece of clothing, not even the journal Sarah carried with her. The desert had given no answers. As summer heat pressed on, the operation scaled down. Rangers, drained and defeated, admitted there was nothing left to find. For the families, the silence was unbearable. Birthdays passed, holidays came and went, and still there was no word. With no bodies, no evidence, and no closure, Michael and Sarah's disappearance became one of those cases that haunted the canyon. A story whispered among hikers about the couple who walked into the desert and never returned. 8 years would pass before the canyon finally gave up one small piece of its secret. In the weeks that followed their disappearance, the Grand Canyon became a stage for one of the most extensive searches the park had seen in years. Dozens of rangers, volunteers, and trained rescuers descended into the maze of ravines. Helicopters scanned from above, their shadows gliding silently across the cliffs. Specialized dog teams were brought in, noses pressed to the ground, weaving in and out of the narrow washes, but the desert gave them nothing. Every path seemed to dissolve into sand, every footprint vanished into stone. By the third week, hope was already slipping. The canyon is vast, over 1 million acres of ridges, gorges, and hidden caves. To search it fully is impossible. Rescuers described the landscape as both breathtaking and merciless. In some places, sheer cliffs dropped hundreds of feet, with no warning. In others, dry washes twisted into labyrinths that swallowed both sound and direction. Even the most experienced searchers admitted the couple could have been just yards away, yet completely invisible. What haunted the investigators most was the complete absence of belongings. Most lost hikers leave a trail behind an item of clothing, food wrappers, even a water bottle dropped in haste. But Michael and Sarah left nothing. Their campsite was never located. Their tent, stove, and sleeping bags had simply vanished. Without those markers, the search lost its anchor. The summer heat pressed on. Temperatures soared above 100 degrees, baking the canyon floor during the day and chilling it at night. Rescuers were pushed to their limits. One ranger later admitted that each time the helicopters lifted off, he wondered if they were searching for ghosts. After a month, the official operations scaled back. The case was quietly shifted from rescue to recovery. For the families, the words were unbearable. Without bodies, there was no closure, only endless questions. Sarah's sister refused to believe they were gone, clinging to the idea that they might have chosen to disappear, to start over somewhere far away. Others whispered darker theories that the canyon had hidden them in a place no human eye would ever see. By the end of that summer, the search had ended. The files were placed in storage, the case labeled unresolved. And for 8 years, the canyon kept its silence, offering no answers, no trace, nothing at all. Until one day, a hiker stumbled across the sand and found something that should not have been there. It was the spring of 2019 when the canyon finally broke its silence. A lone hiker, Daniel Reeves, had decided to take a less traveled route, deep into one of the side washes, far from the popular trails. He wasn't looking for anything extraordinary, only solitude, the kind of quiet that only the canyon could offer. The sun was low that afternoon, casting long shadows across the sand when he noticed something unusual. At first, it looked like a piece of weathered fabric half buried in the earth. He nearly walked past it, assuming it was just an old tarp or trash left behind. But something about the color caught his attention. Kneeling down, he brushed away the sand, and what emerged made him pause. It was a faded backpack, its straps brittle with age, the zipper rusted but still intact. Daniel hesitated before opening it. Inside were objects that time had not completely erased. A water bottle, cracked and dry. A notebook, its pages warped but still legible in places. And at the very bottom, a small leather-bound journal with handwriting that was still clear. The name Sarah Thompson was written on the first page. His heart raced. He had read about the couple years before the ones who vanished without a trace. And now, in his hands, was the first physical proof that they had indeed made it this far. Park officials were immediately contacted. The area was sealed off, and investigators returned for the first time in nearly a decade. The backpack was carefully cataloged, every item inside studied. Among them was Michael's old Nikon camera, corroded but surprisingly intact. When the memory card was recovered, technicians worked to restore what they could. A handful of images were eventually pulled from the device. Photographs of Sarah smiling against the canyon walls, shots of the river winding below, and one final blurry picture taken at dusk. The last image unsettled investigators. It showed what appeared to be the couple's small tent pitched in a narrow clearing. Behind it, in the fading light, a shadow stretched across the rocks. It could have been nothing more than a trick of the setting sun, or it could have been someone standing there. The photo gave no clear answers, only questions. For the families, the discovery was both a relief and a torment. After 8 years of silence, here was proof that Michael and Sarah had been there, that they had set up camp at least one last time. But the backpack raised more mysteries than it solved. If their belongings had been buried here, where were their bodies? Who or what had caused them to leave everything behind? The canyon had spoken, but in whispers, not in truths. The discovery of the backpack brought with it a surge of theories, each more unsettling than the last. Investigators, journalists, and amateur sleuths all tried to piece together the puzzle of what happened to Michael and Sarah in those final days. The objects inside the pack, though ordinary on the surface, became fragments of a narrative that refused to fully reveal itself. The notebook contained only a few entries. Most were casual observations, notes about the heat, sketches of plants, a mention of how quiet the canyon felt compared to their previous trips. But the final page, dated the 10th of June, 2011, echoed Sarah's earlier words. Strange noises last night, like footsteps near the tent. Michael says, "It's the wind." I'm not sure. The handwriting trailed off after that. Some argued this pointed to an accidental encounter with another person in the canyon. The Grand Canyon draws all kinds, backpackers, recluses, even drifters who choose to live far from society. Could the couple have run into someone who didn't want to be found? The blurry shadow in the last photo seemed to lend weight to that idea, yet no suspects were ever identified, no evidence of foul play uncovered. Another theory focused on the landscape itself. Flash floods are one of the canyon's deadliest dangers, sweeping through without warning and erasing everything in their path. If Michael and Sarah had camped in the wrong place, a sudden rush of water could have taken their lives, carrying their bodies miles away. The backpack, partially buried, might have been left behind as the flood receded. Still, investigators noted there were no weather reports of heavy rain in the area during that week, making the scenario less convincing. Some experts suggested disorientation. The canyon's scale can warp a person's sense of direction, and dehydration can quickly bring on confusion and panic. If the couple had wandered in search of water or shelter, they could have become lost in one of the hundreds of side canyons. In their exhaustion, they may have abandoned their gear, believing it slowed them down. But experienced hikers found this hard to accept. Michael and Sarah were careful, methodical, and unlikely to discard supplies critical to their survival. There were even stranger theories. A handful of locals whispered about the canyon's long history of disappearances, linking it to the so-called missing 411 cases across the American wilderness. People vanish without trace, often leaving behind bizarre clues: a shoe neatly placed on a rock, clothing folded as if intentionally. To some, the buried backpack fit this pattern. It was intact, not scattered, as though someone or something had deliberately placed it there. But the most haunting question remained the simplest. If the backpack was here, why were their bodies not? Search teams returned to the site in 2019, expanding the grid for miles around. They used drones, dogs, and climbing teams, probing cracks and ledges. Nothing surfaced. It was as though Michael and Sarah had stepped out of their campsite and dissolved into the desert air. For the families, each theory offered a fleeting hope of clarity, only to collapse under the weight of new doubts. Sarah's sister believed the photo proved someone else had been there. Michael's colleagues dismissed foul play and leaned toward a natural accident. Park rangers, hardened by years of unanswered cases, admitted they simply didn't know. The Grand Canyon, with its silence and immensity, kept its secret. The backpack was both a revelation and a taunt, proof that they had lived those last days, and proof that the canyon could hide the truth forever. The canyon has always been a place of awe, its cliffs carved by millions of years, its silence stretching farther than the eye can see. But for those who know the story of Michael and Sarah, that silence carries a different weight. It is the silence of unanswered questions, of footsteps that end without explanation, of a life interrupted and never returned. The backpack gave their family something tangible to hold on to. Yet it also deepened the mystery. Why had it been buried in sand, as if placed there intentionally? Who, or what, had left it behind? The journal's last words hinted at unease, at something felt but unseen. The final photograph captured a shadow that should not have been there. These fragments form a story, but one that refuses to resolve. Years later, hikers still pause at the mention of the couple. Some believe they met with an accident, their bodies hidden in the canyon's endless folds. Others whisper about a darker presence, whether human or something else, that watches those who wander too deep. Each theory offers comfort to some, but none can quiet the gnawing truth: the canyon has not given them back. For the families, the waiting never ends. A knock at the door, a phone call, a news report, even after all this time. Each carries the faint hope of discovery. Closure remains a word they cannot reach. And for every unanswered question about Michael and Sarah, the canyon seems to hold 1,000 more about the others who have disappeared within its vast walls. Standing at the rim today, tourists gaze at the beauty below, unaware of the secrets hidden in its depths. But those who know the story understand that beneath the silence lies a haunting truth. The Grand Canyon does not forget, it only conceals. And somewhere in its shadows, the last moments of Michael and Sarah remain, sealed away in the desert, beyond the reach of time. The question lingers, suspended in the dry air, carried on the wind that whispers through the cliffs. How many more stories lie buried, waiting for the sand to shift and reveal what has been hidden? If you found this story haunting, and you want to hear more tales of people who vanished without a trace, consider subscribing to our channel. Every week, we bring you stories of disappearances, unsolved mysteries, and places that hold secrets the world has yet to uncover. Your support helps us continue exploring these forgotten cases, giving voice to those who can no longer speak for themselves, and keeping their stories alive. So, if you haven't already, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who loves mystery, and subscribe to stay with us on this journey into the unknown. Because out there, in the deserts, forests, and mountains, too many stories remain untold. And together, we can bring them back to light.